Hey there, Darren Garman here, and welcome to this episode of the Heartland Multifamily Show, the place for all things multifamily. And I am excited about this episode because we're going to talk about a recipe. That's right, man. We're going to talk about a recipe. I'm dying to go over these ingredients with you that will make your next and every future multifamily acquisition you take part in unbelievably profitable, man. I'm looking forward to this recipe. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about it. We're going to cover it. And then we're going to talk about how you can go ahead and mix these ingredients and have a super profitable multifamily acquisition for you. Welcome to the Heartland Multifamily Show, the shorter, more profitable path to multifamily ownership and investing. All right, like I said, this is going to be a fun episode, and you're going to love it because I'm going to give you 3 ingredients that if you use these 3 things, your next acquisition is going to be just absolutely phenomenal. And I know it sounds like I'm like blowing hot air and I'm blowing steam. I promise you I'm not, because what I'm going to share with you has a proven track record, okay? But before we get into that, just a reminder, you are at the channel, the place for all things multifamily. So do me a favor, if you like what we talk about on this episode, do me a favor, share some comments below. We'd love to hear from you and we'd love to have some dialogue with you as well. And don't forget, this is the place for all things real world multifamily. So make sure you hit that subscribe button below and join us here on the Heartland Multifamily Show. All right, I told you I'm going to be sharing with you 3 huge ingredients to an unbelievably profitable multifamily acquisition. Not only your next acquisition, but all future acquisitions after that. And I know it sounds like I'm kind of, talking hot air here. I promise you I'm not. Why? Because what I'm going to share with you has a 30-plus year track record. Okay? This isn't just like thought. This isn't like theory. This isn't like, I scribbled on a legal pad and thought this might be something good to talk about. No, this is real world proven. Proven in the real world that it works. I have thousands of units, apartment unit experience with what I'm going to share with you with these 3 multifamily profit ingredients. And again, if you use these 3, especially simultaneously, like I said, your next acquisition and every acquisition after that is going to turn out more than likely to exceed your expectations. Okay, so enough of that. Let's talk about these ingredients. What are these ingredients, Darren? And why is there only 3? Well, we could go over a ton of, like I said, theory, and we can go over 25 bullet points, but if you nail these 3 things down, these 3 multifamily acquisition ingredients, 90% of the heavy lifting is done for you. Okay, in terms of how profitable the multifamily property will be, how much will it cash flow, how good of a return it's going to have, maybe to you or maybe other investors if you're maybe part of a syndication or a partnership, or even if you're just doing this for you passively or actively, make sure these 3 ingredients are being used in that next multifamily acquisition. Obviously, if you're an active owner, investor, doing it yourself, sure, you want to be using these. But even if you're passive, somebody else is like running the show, make sure they're implementing these 3 strategies. And if you do, the benefits will by far, no question in my mind, the benefits will exceed your expectations. Okay, so what are these ingredients, Darren? What are they? Let's talk about them. First of all, number one is a surprise ingredient for many people. When I tell them this, they're like, really? That's really an ingredient? It is. How do I know? 30 plus years of doing it, 30 plus years of results, and 30 plus years of seeing this in action. And it's actually a real simple ingredient. I've talked about this on and off in maybe some other episodes, or maybe when I've been interviewed on other folks' podcasts, those kinds of things. So you might have heard this somewhere from me if you kind of follow me, but no matter what, if you've been following me or not, here it is. make sure, ingredient number one is this, make sure that the property that you're going to be purchased has been owned by the same owner a minimum of 15 years. I'm going to say that again. Do everything you can to make sure that property that you're going to be purchasing, acquiring, has been owned by the same owner for 15 years minimum. Now you're asking yourself, why in the hell would that be a success ingredient, Darren? I don't get it. I don't understand. Think about this. Let's go ahead and let's kind of look at the dichotomy of this. Let's go ahead and let's turn this on. Let's look at the opposite thing of this, okay? Let's say you're looking at a property that's changed hands 8 times in the last 15 years. Do you think a really good property would have sold 8 times if it was a really good property? Of course not. Because the benchmark of a really, really good multifamily property that has a real proven track record, my friend, is how long have the owners owned it? Come on, think about it. If it has been owned for 15 years, it's been a pretty damn good multifamily property, don't you think? Right? No one is going to own a property for 15 years or longer if it sucks. If it's not a good property, no one's going to own it that long. Right? So you already have built-in success with this property in many, many ways before you even buy it, because based on its track record of ownership, it tells you that, hey, this is a good property to own. Right? And see, a lot of people don't think about that. A lot of people don't think about that. And because, like I said, the opposite of that is if it's a property that's been sold 6 or 7 times, even 4 or 5 times in the last 15 years, that's red flags. Those are red flags. That tells you there's something wrong. This property doesn't behave. It doesn't work very well. There's something going on here. For people to keep trading this property every 3 to 4 years, you don't trade properties that are doing great every 3 to 4 years, my friend. Okay, you just don't. And that's why success recipe number 1, acquisition, successful acquisition, multifamily acquisition recipe, ingredient, my friend, number 1, is do everything you can to make sure that property has been owned for at least 15 years. And here's like a little subcategory of that. A lot of times, multifamily owners, when they own the properties that long, okay, they don't keep their rents up as high as they could possibly be. They don't do a really good job of watching the expenses either, because they get in a habit of running the property. It runs fine, it does okay, so we'll just kind of leave it be. We won't rock the boat. We won't go ahead and push the envelope, right? They want to as long as it's kind of predictable and runs pretty good, they're going to let it run predictable and pretty good. And what does that mean? The majority of the time, that property that's been owned and doing great for 15 years still isn't doing as good as it could be doing. In terms of maybe where those rents could be, maybe where those expenses could be, maybe where the management systems could be. So that's another benefit. Not only does it provide you a track record of, hey, this is a good property, I think I should own it too, right? It also has a bonus ingredient of more than likely those long-term owners have not done their best job at maximizing value. That's where you can step in and not only take over a property that has a proven 15 or year or longer track record of success that you can just go ahead and inherit, all right? But now you can even make it better. That's why that is ingredient number 1, and that's why that should be on your mind all the time when you're looking at purchasing multifamily is, has it been owned 15 years or more? Okay, let's go into success ingredient number 2. Success ingredient number 2, and it's simply this, okay? Is it owned by a local owner? Is it owned by mom and pop, I call them? Does mom and pop own them or have they own them? Okay, that's success ingredient number 2. Why is that a success ingredient, Darren? Who cares who owns it? Who cares if the local landlord owns it versus some institutional company, that has a big office building with, thousands of employees? Who cares? Here's why. Okay? Mom and pop owners, do you think they pay a little bit more attention to the details of a multifamily property versus somebody sitting in a cubicle somewhere? Of course they do. Okay. Do you think they have a little better relationship with the residents that live there? All right, we're going to take a quick break. I hope you're enjoying this episode. I'm going to be having a free webinar coming up, the link's below, on how to correctly and with low risk invest your IRA or 401k in really good multifamily properties. The majority of our investors do this. I do this personally. It's not illegal. Make sure you click the link below. We'd love to have you. Maybe even on a first name basis, okay? Versus the person sitting in a cubicle, or even a management company, local management company, with somebody sitting behind a desk at the management company. Of course, you know the answer to that, right? And then who's paying more attention, okay, to the operations, the daily operations of the property? Mom and pop are. Why? Because they're mom and pop. They're there. They're seeing it. It's part of them. It's part of them. And when something's part of somebody, you can guarantee that if and when you take over, you're not only getting that benefit of a really good property, but you're getting the benefit of years of relationship with residents, with vendors, okay? Even with, you could even say officials around the city. Maybe it's local government officials, maybe it's housing inspectors, maybe all of those things branch out from mom and pop owner, okay? Versus Joe institutional owner, right? I'm the institutional real estate trust that owns these and maximize the rents and cut the expenses and get rid of, do this and do that, without any real regard to operating a community versus an asset. Okay. Now, the two ingredients I gave you, 15-year plus owner, okay, number one. Number two, mom and pop owner that has that congruency with that property. Just think of the kind of property this is going to be when you take over, when you have those two things. Now, I know the world isn't perfect. And in a perfect world, this isn't always the case. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that later. But if you get these 2 out of 3 things locked up, man, your chances of having a phenomenal apartment community that will exceed your expectations, even your investor expectations too, if that's the case, man, your chances of succeeding with this are huge, huge. Okay, so let's get to success ingredient number 3. Now, you may pick on me a little bit about this ingredient, and I don't mean this to be, I don't mean this to do any kind of damage, or I don't mean any disrespect to people when I talk about it. By the way, I'm not going to talk about anything political, by the way. That's the good news. But I will say something that you might cringe a little bit when I talk to you about success ingredient number 3. And here it is. You preferably want to be buying at a time the seller does not want to sell the property. I'll say that again, just to make sure you clearly heard what I said. Okay. You want to be buying at a time the seller does not want to sell the property. Okay. That is success acquisition in multifamily ingredient number 3. And you probably have already guessed by that ingredient why that would be the case. Because see, you want to be buying from somebody that really wants to sell. Okay, they're not just floating the idea out there, maybe we should sell it, oh, let's think about it, and not really have any true motivation behind selling it. That's not who you really want to be working with, right? You want to be working with someone that has a problem they've got to fix, a life event that's come up and happened to them, possibly even a tragedy that has happened in or around their lives. Now, are we wishing bad upon people? Of course not. Not at all. But when people sell when they don't want to, usually it's for a reason that frankly can be very problematic for them. Okay? And unfortunately, or fortunately, what one person's problem turns out to be another person's opportunity many times. And so when you're dealing with someone that's selling their multifamily property, you want to be dealing with them ideally for reasons where they don't really want to sell, but they're like, you know what, Darren, we got to sell. Okay, we got to sell. What can we do to get something figured out? That's who you want to be dealing with. Okay, is dealing with people that want to sell at a time they do not want to sell. Okay, so let's recap these ingredients one more time. Ingredient number 1, property owned by same owner for a minimum of 15 years. Okay, ingredient number 2, mom and pop local owner owns these properties. Family, local company, but they're local. They live there. They've got relationships with they've got relationships with the residents, with the vendors, with the community. Okay, and then number 3, dealing with someone that, you know, at the time they don't really want to sell, but they have to. It's time to sell. It's at a time we don't want to, but Darren, we want to sell. Okay, now you get those 3 ingredients. You mix those up in a recipe, and you will find 90% of the heavy lifting done for you in multifamily. So as a matter of fact, so when I sit here and I just think out loud at the multifamily properties that I've dealt with that have been the most successful, okay, the multifamily properties, hell, that we still own, that have been the most successful, and the multifamily properties that we're continuing to look for, that we want to own, guess what they all have in common? Almost every single one of them have these 3 things in common, okay? And you, my friend, want to make them your recipe for your next multifamily acquisition, all right? So I'm glad you've joined me on this episode of the Heartland Multifamily Show. And again, you use those 3 ingredients, you use them together, you use them consistently, man, you're going to have a fantastic multifamily acquisition, not only the next acquisition, but every one after that. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.